Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. The Browns, they made it official today, the hiring of offensive line coach Andy Dickerson to replace Bill Callahan, who went to the Titans to coach with his son. Also, Roy Istvan is named as the assistant offensive line coach. He came over from the Eagles. Kevin Stefanski in a release by the Browns on the new offensive line coach, Andy Dickerson. Andy loves teaching and will bring a passion and energy that will greatly benefit our linemen, understands the high standard that room must have in order for the offense to be successful. So Dickerson has some history with the Seattle Seahawks. He was their offensive line coach. Also was on the staff as the run game coordinator for the Rams under Sean McVay. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. So Quincy, it's official, and Dickerson's interesting. He's a younger guy, has some different influences that could serve the Browns well and could help reshape the offense a little bit.
Yeah, and definitely with the run game, right? I think that's where his expertise and his experience is most interesting, is what he's done with the run game out there in Seattle. He was a run game coordinator. I also think, Bill Callahan did a great job with this team, but when you look around in this offensive line room, most of his work has been done, right? He has developed the guys who have needed to be developed. We've gotten a lot out of them, and now it's time for this offensive line to go into a new journey, which is going to be running more out of shotgun, trying to have more of those spread sets in and more inside zone, and maybe a different voice is going to be helpful. Also, there were some, like Jed Wills, for example, right? Not Bill Callahan's most successful project, but maybe a new voice in that room and a new method will be something that helps you get the most out of a guy like Jed.
Yeah, the other thing that he could bring, being Dickerson, is motion. There's a lot of motion, and he has his roots in Sean McVay's offense that uses all that motion, especially in the run game.
Yeah, and you look at what the Browns had issues with stopping on the defensive end, right? It was all that motion. It was all that just getting them out of alignment. So not only does this move make you better if you're the Browns offensively, because you're being more modern, doing more of the stuff that you see other teams doing, getting ahead of the curve, but I also think it makes your defense better because it gets them used to doing stuff that all the other teams are going to be doing, especially the really good playoff level teams, right? Shane Steichen had a day against us with the motion and all of that. Also, you got to think, Deshaun Watson still as dangerous as a runner as he's ever been. He averages more yards per scramble, almost a full more yard per scramble now than he did previously, even in Houston. So still a top tier athlete. And when we talk about the running game, we're not just talking about how to use Nick Chubb and some of these pin pulls, some of these inside zone runs, but we're also talking about how we can play Deshaun Watson off of that. And the one thing that the Browns haven't done well to this point is incorporating Deshaun Watson into that design run game in a way that really makes sense. And I think you're going to see stuff like with what the Chiefs were able to do when they really needed it. They could pull out an inside zone option with Pat Mahomes and get 40 yards out of it. I think you could do the same thing with Deshaun.
All right, honest evaluation of what you thought of Deshaun Watson in 2023. I know you've done this on your show as well.
Yeah, the thing that I always get a laugh out of is when people compare these 5 games to what he did before. This was clearly a much more positive sample than the 2022 sample, right? I think he had one bad game in the bunch. He didn't put up amazing numbers in any of these games, but if you watch him, you felt like he was definitely helpful to winning, right? Now, some people give him the criticism that none of the games that the Browns have won, it felt like Deshaun Watson had to put the team on the back, but that's an impossible thing to ask out of somebody who's on a team that went to the playoffs with 26% of the salary cap on injured reserve. Clearly, this roster is not needed to be carried. So I don't think anybody would have had to carry this team. This team was able to carry the quarterback position for most of the season. So to me, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag from him, but mostly leaning in a positive direction. I thought he made some strides in being able to manage the game. And look, as much as we want 2020 Deshaun, 2019 Deshaun, right? We want to see those big plays and those big yardage numbers. What we're also going to need from Deshaun, if this team wants to win the Super Bowl, is he's going to have times where he has to manage the game, right? If you watch Pat Mahomes, there's some times where he's making those, oh my God, that's Pat Mahomes plays, right? Where you can't believe what you're watching. And then there's times where it's pretty boring, right? He's just chucking it 5 yards here, 7 yards here. And Deshaun showed that in that Baltimore game. He could do 5 yards here, 7 yards here. He can make some of those big time throws that we expect him to make. I think, honestly, we just need to get a full sample of games from Deshaun Watson. That's been the biggest flaw with this whole thing, is that he's only played 11 games in 2 years. We really need to see him play 17 games this year, at least 8 in a row, because I think if we would have gotten 5, 6, 7, 8 games in a row, we would be walking away very excited about what Deshaun Watson was able to do, especially once that schedule got weaker in the second half. Keep in mind, all of the things that he's done this year was in the tough part of the schedule, and it wasn't like he was in there consecutively in the first half of the season. He had 3 games consecutively, long break, 3 more games. I think his sample is pretty impressive. Now, does that mean he's going to be an MVP candidate, top 5 quarterback? No, I think he has some growth to make to get to that point. I think he really does need to make health a priority in his play style. I think he's a guy who can win from the pocket and make great throws in that pocket area. And when he plays his best football is when he's staying tall in that pocket. And I don't see him rely on that enough, right? We know he can run. We know he can do that. But his running kind of needs to be a complement to his play style and not one of the main dishes. And right now, I think he's trying to make that a main dish, but maybe that's because he wasn't super comfortable with what he was running. And with more comfort, with more familiar concepts, he will be able to do that a lot better.
Is this a pivotal year in the Deshaun
Absolutely.
Watson era?
This is it. Right? Like, if he stinks this year, then we're talking about how we're getting off of Deshaun Watson and his contract, right? We're talking about eating a large salary cap number just so we can have less dead monies in the next coming years. Yeah, man, the Browns get their first round picks back next year, and they're going to have their first round picks going forward, which means quarterback can be back on the table if it makes sense for them, whether it be through trade, another trade where you give up 3 first round picks, or whether it be through the draft, right? You're going to have those options available to you. So if you're Deshaun Watson, like, I know the guaranteed contract guarantees the money, but if you want to guarantee the opportunity to continue to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, this is a huge year. This is a massive year, right? Because if it works out this year, the Browns will be more than happy to give that an extension and to be able to spread that cap number out so they're never over 12% for him in the total cap number. But if it doesn't, then they're going to have to make some tough decisions. They have to decide how they want to move forward, because now they have all the tools available to them when it comes to the draft and everything else to pursue an upgrade or to move on via the draft and just have a quarterback there with the lower cap number while they eat your cap number. So, yeah, if you're Deshaun Watson, this is a massive. I mean, it's the biggest year of his career.
All right. So, what does the offense need to do to showcase his skill set? And do you think it's headed in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it is headed in the right direction. I think it's headed in the right direction, not because they're custom building everything specifically to Deshaun Watson's specs, right? I don't think that that's what's necessary in order to win with Deshaun Watson. I think it's headed in the right direction simply because it's more of what everybody else is doing that is successful around the league, right? You want to see him try to do the stuff that you see C.J. Stroud doing. You want to see him do the stuff that Shane Steichen's doing with that offense and that Jalen Hurts did in 2022. You want to see him do those kind of things, work in that concept, right? I think so many people are fixated on, is this going to be 2020? Is this going to be 2019? And we're not focused on pulling Deshaun Watson into the future, because I think if you do pull him into the future, not only is it better for your organization going forward to be more advanced, more ahead of trends, but also I think it's good for him, right? I think these concepts evolve because they're good for quarterbacks, and you need to have him be able to run some of those concepts.
All right, before we go to break, news out of Cincinnati. Bengals, it appears, reportedly ready to move on from their running back, Joe Mixon, in the offseason, which will be interesting. They had Chase Brown that they drafted last year. Mixon had to take reduced money, but he was still pretty productive for the Bengals.
Yeah. You know, Joe Mixon, like, when it comes to running backs, there are 2 tiers of running backs, and one kind of gets fairly treated right. The Ezekiel Elliott's back in the day, the Derrick Henrys, the Nick Chubbs, they don't get treated like running backs. Those are franchise level players. And then there are guys who are just below that who get released, get bad deals. And that's where Joe Mixon is, right? He has always been a solid back, but he's never been more than a 4.2 yard per carry back, sometimes even worse than that. He's very talented, had some good moments, but Cincinnati, they're not as dedicated to running the ball as some of the teams with those players that I mentioned. And, he's getting older, and they've been drafting running backs the last 3 years. So the writing's really been on the wall for him. And I'm not really surprised that it ended up like this here in Cincinnati.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, CBS Sports with teams in the NFL that are poised for a major fall in 2024. We'll tell you if the Browns are one of them. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. NFL teams poised to take a major fall in 2024, this according to CBSSports.com. They say the Browns are, in fact, one of them. Watson wasn't exactly lighting it up before he was lost for the season with a shoulder injury, and he hasn't been the same quarterback since signing with Cleveland. Also plays in the AFC North, the division where every team was over 500 last year. This all comes down to Watson, who needs to be the quarterback the Browns paid for. If Watson is mediocre, the Browns will be too. Quincy, again, he needs to play better. I think he's 8-4 as a starter for the Browns. It's something along those lines. And this is
funny how Joe Flacco's record gets brought up, but not Deshaun's identical record.
And it's a really good roster. He does need to play better, but I'm not sure how you look at that defense and say, big fall.
Because they want it to happen, right? Like, that's just, they're writing what they want to happen. We witnessed this all last year where people were predicting 6 wins, 7 wins, 5 wins for the Cleveland Browns, and we all thought it was ridiculous. How could people come up with this thought if they're doing an intelligent process? And the whole thing is that it's not an intelligent process. He's just writing what he wants to happen, right? Like, okay, I think the Browns are going to stink because Deshaun Watson hasn't been good. And look, Deshaun Watson can play better. Absolutely. Most certainly. But this team was 4-1 with Deshaun Watson out there. This team had a plus 63 point differential with Deshaun Watson out there at starting quarterback, which is identical to the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. So to act like this team has any signs of like, oh, they're going to fall off a cliff when Deshaun's out there, like, that would make sense to me, Dave, if this team had a losing record and then Joe Flacco came in and saved the season. Or that would make sense to me if, like, Deshaun had a 500 record as a starter, or Deshaun had no moments this year where it felt like he was playing well. But the fact is the vast majority of the time he was out there, we felt like he was playing winning football at the very least at the quarterback position, which suggests to me that he's not going to be a negative. And just not having a negative at the quarterback position for this Browns team is something that they can deal with, given how good that defense was, given the fact that Joe Flacco won Comeback Player of the Year. And he led the league in interceptions the month he started. Like,
yeah,
this is a team that can withstand a lot. I don't know how people are falling back on it, but we predicted it, right? We were like, hey, as good as this team's doing right now, 11-6 with all of these injuries, they will find a way to predict that we're going to go 6-10 next year somehow.
How concerned were you with it seemed like, and it's kind of interesting because Ken Dorsey mentioned this in his press conference. It seemed like his fundamentals and his footwork just kind of, and I guess with a mobile athletic quarterback, it might be more, those things might tend to drift a little bit, but that was kind of what Dorsey's main thing was. Give him a sound fundamentals so that in the fourth quarter he can rely on those fundamentals in the pocket.
Yeah, it looked like a combination of things. One, he hasn't played that much football, right? Like 11 games in 2 years. Well, not just 11 games in 2 years, 11 games in 3 years, right? So he hasn't played that much football. I think that does play a factor in it. And also, what he was running last year, like the thing about an offense for a quarterback is that it's new footwork as well. And they were asking him to do a lot of 5-step drops, 7-step drops, and those drops are key to how you time up the route with the wide receiver. So I don't think he was used to doing that, right? I think he was used to moving on his own time, reading on his own time, and throwing on his own time, not having all three of those things kind of closely connected and tied together. So I think that was kind of a growing pain in the style of offense that he was in. We'll see if that continues, if he gets more comfortable doing that, or if they just ask him to do that less. I think also it's just part of coming back and playing. It's like, yeah, he's going to have times where he's played some football, but he hasn't been in this specific situation with his body, and he kind of forgot what the muscle memory was, and he's going to have to relearn it.
All right, this from PFF.com. One underrated free agent at every position. Running back, they go J.K. Dobbins. Were it not for an Achilles injury that ended 2023 season, week 1, Dobbins could have been hitting the offseason a chance to be one of the top 8 running backs in free agency. That injury likely means 1-year prove-it deal for a player that has averaged 5.6 yards a carry in his career, is just 25 years old, and has just 266 NFL carries in 4 seasons. He's been injured a lot. Wide receiver, they go Kendrick Bourne. Didn't drop past 37 catch targets 2023 before going down to a season-ending injury. Has a 6.4 drop percent rate in his career. Either of those two interest you for the Browns? I don't know if you can sign a free agent running back that's coming off an injury because your main guy is coming off an injury. I think you need a safety net in case Nick Chubb takes longer than expected to get back to being Nick Chubb.
Yeah, especially Achilles injury in season when he's not guaranteed to play week 1. I don't know if that fits the Browns' timeline, skill set wise. J.K. Dobbins fits their timeline a little bit. But also, J.K. is somebody who kind of needs to be your number 1 running back. And this is kind of the issue that some running backs face. It's not that these guys age horribly, it's that they age just enough to where they can't play the same role that they're really good at playing, right? JK's a give him 20 carries and he plays well throughout the course of a game type running back. He's not a instant carry, right? The microwave type running backs where it's like, I just need 10 and I can get off on 10. He can't get off on 10, and you're not going to get 20 with Nick Chubb back there. So, yeah, it's going to be tough for JK. I don't know what his market looks like. But I don't think that timeline matches up for the Cleveland Browns. With the Browns and Kendrick Bourne, it could be interesting. Look, they're going to be in the market for a wide receiver. I don't know if they're going to be as aggressive as people think. Like, I think some people are thinking we go out and like trade for somebody's number 1. I think they feel like they have 2 pretty good players in the receiving room when it comes to David Njoku and Amari Cooper, and they feel like that's enough for somebody who's getting paid $230 million to throw to. Maybe they look to add somebody around there, like a prove-it deal for Mike Williams or something like that. Or maybe if Michael Pittman doesn't get the long-term money that he wants, you give him like a 1-year deal. But I don't know if it's Kendrick Bourne is where they go, but it wouldn't be out the realm of possibility.
All right. A lot of people expect the Browns to draft a wide receiver and draft him reasonably early. I don't know about that, but I do know they have struggled drafting wide receivers. These are the Browns wide receivers that have been drafted since 2010. In the first round, with the 15th pick, in 2016, it was Corey Coleman. Second round, Greg Little, not pictured in this second round supplemental draft, was Josh Gordon. Third round, some Andrew Berry selections: Cedric Tillman, David Bell, Anthony Schwartz. Fourth round, we go Travis Benjamin, Ricardo Lewis, Antonio Callaway, Vince Mailey. Fifth round, Higgins and Peyton. Sixth round, DPJ, Michael Woods, Carlton Mitchell, Damian Ratley. That's an ugly list.
You know what?
That is an ugly list in a passing league.
That list is a billboard for not trading back, because you know how short that list would be if you would have just drafted Julio Jones in 2011 and then came back around in 2014 and drafted Mike Evans instead of trading back a million times to get Justin Gilbert. Like, this is why you take the best player at times, because this does not happen if you draft Julio Jones. But even Corey Coleman, we traded back from 2 to Corey Coleman in 19. This is why you don't trade back. I know people love trading back pre-draft. I'm not a fan. Trading back silly, especially somebody's good. If you had to imagine this for our younger Browns fans who don't understand what Julio Jones was, imagine if the Browns had a chance to draft Marvin Harrison and everybody knew it. And we traded back, to get Tez Walker. That's pretty much what is going on here. But yeah, they've had an issue developing wide receivers. Honestly, I don't think it's kind of hard to guess why this list is this long and why it is the way it is. Some of it has to do with where you've invested at the wide receiver position. Only one first or second round pick in 10 years. Well, not 10 years, my bad. 14 years. I'm getting old. 14 years, one first round pick, one second round pick in those 14 years, almost 1.5 decades. And also, the quarterbacks have certifiably stunk through most of that time period, right? And it's hard to develop a team when you don't have a quarterback, because you don't have consistent coaching, because you don't have the same offense, and these guys are changing the offense every year. So I think that's a part of it as well. You look at the names that you actually remember for producing, those are all guys drafted after 2018. And whether you like Baker Mayfield or Deshaun Watson, we do have to understand that the quarterback position has been stabilized since 2018 somewhat compared to what it used to be, which is an open faucet.
Yeah, and again, you want to know why the franchise has struggled. It's a passing league. You haven't found a quarterback. You haven't found receivers. It's awfully tough to score when you don't have quarterbacks or wide receivers in the NFL. Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side break. We'll talk a little defense. Jim Schwartz, year 2. What might it look like? Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, Jim Schwartz comes in, wins Assistant Coach of the Year for the defense. Defense was really good. Really good at home, wasn't quite as good on the road. Should we expect the defense to be even better in year 2? And if so, how can it be even better?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to have guys who are more comfortable in their role. I mean, look what JOK was doing at the end of the season. That was a guy who finally, grasped what they wanted him to do and really started to take advantage of that. Also, you're going to have more time to figure out, okay, what are some other counters for how teams are going at Myles Garrett, right? Because we might just have to give up the notion that we can get him off these double teams. I don't think the NFL is going to let that happen. Teams are just going to double team Myles Garrett, right? So if that's going to happen, how can we create havoc around those plans so that those plans aren't as successful as they were in the back half of the season? As far as the road home stuff, that changes every year. Like, Jacksonville was one of the best home teams in the NFL in 2022, and in 2023 they were the absolute worst home team in the NFL. That stuff's kind of cyclical, right? Like, sometimes you just don't play well on the road for whatever reason. It is not anything really that tangible that can be changed or fixed during the course. It's just a thing. And sometimes it's just mental, right? You have a bad performances in 2 road games, and then it makes you feel like you can't play well on the road, and that's something that's always there. It's just something that's kind of hard to predict. But yeah, in year 2, this defense should get better. I mean, you're gonna have more guys who know how to understand the nuances of it, play better in it, and then you can add to what you saw successful with the resources of free agency in the draft.
All right, so Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, you mentioned, played really well, especially late in the year. Was one of the few defensive players that had a good game in that playoff game against the Texans. Do you think the Browns should extend him?
Yeah. I see him as something more than just a linebacker, right? If we're just looking at him, it's like Anthony Walker is your quintessential linebacker, right? He does the linebacker stuff. He does what he needs to. He's not really a playmaker outside of that. And I can see why people would be hesitant to pay him. But JOK is a playmaker. 20 TFLs this year. Like Roquan Smith, who gets a lot of hype for being one of the best linebackers in the NFL, had 5. So think about that, how many plays that JOK was making around the line of scrimmage. Also, his average depth of tackle was less than 2 yards, which, again, you look at All-Pro, first-team All-Pro Roquan Smith, average depth of tackle 4.5 yards. So just look at what JOK's numbers look like compared to some of the better linebackers out there. They're pretty competitive, if not impressive, compared to those guys. So yeah, if I'm the Browns, I look to extend them because I think using JOK in a creative way is going to be a big part of the Cleveland Browns' plan to kind of make teams pay for doubling up on Myles Garrett. I think he's going to be a huge part of that. And I think he has great chemistry with Myles, and great chemistry with this defensive line. And if he's willing to get an extension done, I think the Browns should be willing to give him one because he's a kind of player that you want to lock up long term.
This is also kind of interesting. This is from Next Gen Stats. Lowest completion percentage allowed, 10-plus air yard passes. So best in the NFL, L'Jarius Sneed, who is going all over the place saying he wants to be paid by the Chiefs. Number 2 is Martin Emerson, 29.3%. Banks just over 30. Ward 36.4, and McCullum 37.1. Just again another indicator of how good Martin Emerson is playing as a defensive back.
And what makes both of those, like number 1 and number 2, so impressive is that those are both guys who aren't the best corners on their team, right? Like McDuffie's the best corner on the Chiefs, and Denzel Ward's still the best corner on the Cleveland Browns. So these guys are getting targeted more often, right? Like that percentage number is really getting tested because they have to throw at Martin Emerson or L'Jarius Sneed, and these guys are answering the bell. And I think Martin Emerson played great. I thought he improved greatly in run defense this year as well. So I'm super excited with what you got out of Martin Emerson. You got 3 guys who were 2 first-round picks at that DB position, and then Martin Emerson, who's playing like a first-round pick. That secondary is in great shape.
Yeah, and Jim Schwartz wants it to be so he can do the things up front that he wants to do. All right, before we go to break, this one's kind of interesting. Not sure I agree with it. Potential landing spots for top free agent offensive linemen. It's from Pro Football Focus. Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle from the Jets, taken in the first round, same draft as the Browns took Jedrick Wills. Potential landing spots: Cardinals, Browns, Titans. Cleveland was decimated by injuries at tackle spots throughout 2023. The landing spot would look more like a swing tackle opportunity, with left tackle Jedrick Wills set to play on his 5th-year option in 2024. Becton would get to fill in at either spot and rebuild his stock, with the Browns adding a contingency plan to protect Deshaun Watson in case of emergency. I suppose if it was cheap enough, you'd look at it, but you've got a lot of money tied up between Wills with that 5th-year option, Jack Conklin. You've already got DeJuan Jones. You got a lot of bodies that can play that position if they can stay healthy. And Becton hasn't been healthy.
And I think that this is a team that, this draft right now has a lot of guys who have swing tackle potential. So I don't really, and I think they're going to draft a tackle anyway. So I don't know if taking that bet on Mekhi Becton is a good idea. Also, Mekhi has had weight issues, which wouldn't be a problem with me necessarily if he didn't have the ACL tear. Now, we talk about ACL tears as if they're like sore muscles are like colds. Like it's just assumed that people come back from them, and for the most part, it is, especially the lighter skill players. But big guys in ACL tears, right? Those 300-pounders, and Mekhi Becton is not just a 300-pounder; he's a 360-pounder. Those guys in ACL injuries is a bigger question mark because it's a lot more weight being thrown on those knees, and then you're asking that weight to shift and play both tackle positions. I don't know if that's a great plan for the Browns, right? I think Mekhi Becton makes sense for somebody who wants to have him play right tackle and give him a chance to start. He makes more sense to me for a younger rebuilding team like a Tennessee Titans. But for the Cleveland Browns, a team that's trying to win now, that's a project, and I don't think you got time for a project at the left tackle position, especially if it's not one you drafted.
Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage, and I can step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about offense, backup quarterback, running back. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. So, Quincy, Browns started 5 quarterbacks last season. 4 of them won games. How important do you think the backup quarterback for the Browns will be this upcoming season with Deshaun Watson coming back from that shoulder injury? And would you roll with DTR as the main backup again?
I think you have to, right? Like, you kind of made a commitment. You drafted him. He didn't get to play that much. He got to play, 3 starts, played half that game. I thought he was showing signs there. But, I mean, you have Super Bowl expectations with this roster, and it's not going to be with the backup quarterback. P.J. Walker to a victory over the 49ers. And that's going to be what the Browns are going to rely on if Deshaun Watson gets hurt for any period of time next year, not DTR, right? DTR will be expected to just be a neutral factor in those games. And he was able to win a game with the Cleveland Browns, just being a neutral factor. Even went on a game-winning drive that season. But everything else around the quarterback position is going to be what we rely on if that quarterback goes down. So who the backup is, it matters less to me than the situation that surrounds the backup quarterback. And if it's a Joe Flacco situation where Deshaun's out for the rest of the season's kind of compromised at that point, right? So it's just going to be what it's going to be. But, yeah, I think DTR could be the backup, and I think that's fine relying on him to be the backup because the backup is really David Njoku. It's really Amari Cooper. It's really hopefully Nick Chubb, right? It's really this defense being able to keep games close. That's going to keep the Browns alive if Deshaun goes down, not a quarterback off the bench. Like, they're on the bench for a reason. They're not going to carry you to very many victories because if they could carry you to victories, they'd start. So that just kind of is how I view it. I think the backup situation for them is more team-wide than just the backup quarterback.
All right, let's take a look at this. Say they decide to go veteran quarterbacks in addition to DTR. DTR they view as a developmental guy, and we'll see. These are notable free agents in the quarterback position this offseason. Kirk Cousins, he's going to be a starter. Baker Mayfield's going to be a starter. But then you get to Tannehill, Winston, Minshew, Brissett. Mitch Trubisky just released. It didn't go well in Pittsburgh. Sam Darnold, Flacco, Wentz, Tyrod Taylor. Do any of those guys, not the first 2 who will be starters somewhere, any of those guys interest you as as a stopgap emergency, make sure we have a veteran guy there?
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston. Jameis because of play style. This is going to be like the Browns are going to try to attack downfield a little bit more this season. And Jameis, he does one thing. He attacks downfield. Now, I feel like Jameis will be a break glass in case of emergency style backup. Like, you only really want him in there if the season's pretty much like in jeopardy because there's an injury at the quarterback position for the rest of the season. If you're just looking for somebody who like, hey, look, we just need to put something together for 2-3 weeks to be good enough to help this defense win, then yeah, you could do that with Jacoby Brissett.
All right. Other area that you have to think about is running back. So not sure what Nick Chubb's comeback will look like. We'll see as it goes on and on. Take a look at these three. This is from Dog Pound Daily. 3 cost-effective running back solutions for the Browns in free agency. Number 3, A.J. Dillon. Again, Packers has kind of split time there. Number 2, they go with Devin Singletary. Does have a history with Ken Dorsey, the new Browns offensive coordinator, was with the Texans this year. And number 1, Zach Moss, another guy, has a history with Ken Dorsey with the Bills. He was with the Colts this year. And actually, when Jonathan Taylor was out, was pretty effective. You look at those 3. One, do you think the Browns need to get somebody like that just to make sure they're not going crazy with Nick Chubb coming back from that injury?
Yeah, I would like it. Like, me personally, like getting somebody like Zach Moss, so you feel like, hey, if we have to start the season out with Nick Chubb getting limited carries because we're working him back off a knee injury, then you could rely on Zach Moss, right? I think they need a real deal professional running back. I think Jerome Ford is good in doses. I think he's a home run hitter as a running back, and I think he still has to get bigger in order for his style to not be as detrimental because he just gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage far too often. So having somebody like Zach Moss where it's like, hey, if you need to play without Nick Chubb or Nick needs to be on limited carries, you have somebody who at least on first down could get you anywhere from 3 to 5 yards. And that's really the one thing this team was missing all year once Nick Chubb went out, was the ability to get 3 or 5 yards on first down.
Yeah, Ford, he did have some chunk plays, some explosive plays, but I believe it was 16 or 18% of his carries went for negative yardage. So you're behind the sticks, and that's tough to deal with. Of the 3 that we mentioned, who do you like? Was Moss the one you liked better? Did you like Singletary? Just your thoughts.
I like
on
Singletary.
those.
I like Zach Moss, but if you're going to get somebody who you feel like you have some feature potential, I think Zach Moss is him.
When you look at the draft, what do you think the Browns do early in the draft? Second, third round, those 2 picks that they have. What positions do they attack, or do they not do it by position?
They probably don't strictly go by position, but just given where all the talent is in the draft, I would not be surprised if they ended up going with what will feel like infrastructure pieces, right? Offensive line, maybe interior defensive line. Well, I don't know. They don't go D-tackle that early, but I wouldn't really be surprised they went offensive line. I know people are expecting shiny, and that's like a wide receiver, maybe a running back, but it's reading to me, this is a good year to get an offensive tackle in the second round.
The other thing is think about, they took a cornerback with their first pick a couple of years ago, and that was the last position. So I think it's probably somebody that they will identify. This guy can play, and this guy will be able to help us. Not necessarily this year, but he can be a guy that plays in the league for several years.
Yeah, and without first-round picks, you need to land on players that you feel like can play, so you're not talent deprived. After you went through those 3 drafts without first-round picks. Luckily, the Browns have done a good job at that, right? Martin Emerson the year before, DeJuan Jones this last year. So this year, you're probably going to look for somebody there. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of what do they want and they can see a need for in the future, and also where is this draft very talented? Because when Martin Emerson went, that was one of the more talented defensive back drafts that we had in recent memory, right? So I think that's going to factor into it as well.
Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Thank you, Dave.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Casey Kinnamon straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino. A night's worth of excitement for just $10.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. This is from Sports Illustrated, the QB confidence index for each team, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. For the Browns, they have a confidence index of 3. Giving it a 3 seems generous. Deshaun Watson has been a disaster since he was acquired for 3 first-round picks, having played 12 games, throwing 14 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. Even worse, Watson has 3 more years on his fully guaranteed deal, carrying cap hits of $63.9 million annually. Watson has to be better, but let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon, Dog Pound Daily Network 2 and 6. Casey, the big stat that they're kind of glossing over with that 3 is the Browns are 8-4 with him as a starting quarterback. Now, he's got to be better, but 8-4 is pretty good.
Yeah, I get that the general consensus is low, but I stop way short of calling it disastrous. What's been disastrous has been the injuries. You know, like I don't use quarterback wins as a be-all, end-all stat, but it's impossible for me to ignore that he was 4-1 in the games he started and finished last year. And there were a few blowouts in that 4-1. You know, but there's the injuries, because every time he got going, an injury happened. So it's kind of stopped the progression. And he even admitted on his own podcast, he is a slow starter, not just in a game, but as the season plays out. And he just never got a chance to hit his stride. And we've seen him, you know, get right to that cusp, and then an injury be a setback. So all of 2024, like the crux is keeping that dude healthy, keeping him on the field. And let's see what we have in him when he plays 8, 9, 10 games in a row, and to see if he can keep expanding his game, because my guess is that he will. What you do know is you have a top flight ceiling on him as a quarterback. We just need him to let him realize that.
Yeah, the concern that you could see, I think mechanics led to some accuracy issues when he didn't play well. So, I had said earlier in this show, actually, I really liked Dorsey's thing. We're going to stress the fundamentals of his footwork so that, you know, when he gets into the fourth quarter, you got a solid. I think that's the right message. And Dorsey, I mean, he worked with Josh Allen. Josh Allen had some issues earlier in his career those were his issues.
Yeah, Allen had accuracy issues, and you typically don't even see quarterbacks change that from college to the pros. If you start off with not accurate, it's hard to gain that at the next level. They had to deconstruct his game and then rebuild it back up, and that's exactly what they did. And you're seeing the results now. Now, I don't even think you really need to deconstruct Deshaun's game, but there are finer points that you need to, tune up. And if you go into that with the right mindset, they're all trying to help him. That's everyone's job on that offensive staff, is getting 4 to his top level. And that's going to be the emphasis from the beginning of training camp up through the very beginning of the season, is how do you get this guy playing at his very, very best?
All right, this from ESPN.com. Off-season questions for every NFL team. For the Browns, they say, can the Browns land another big-time playmaker? Browns already have 2 Pro Bowl pass catchers, Amari Cooper, David Njoku. However, Cooper will turn 30 this summer. Getting one more proven receiver could be what helps Deshaun Watson regain his form and elevates Cleveland to another level offensively. I think that's 100% accurate.
Yeah, we've been saying it on here, and I'm gonna keep banging the table. My white whale is and will be Brandon Ayuk. Like I just look at the league. This is the type of dude that you see Barry. He's going into his 5th-year option. He's not happy. He's disgruntled. They're probably not going to sign him to a long-term contract. They're probably going to turn that and give the bag to Deebo Samuel. AB, make the phone call. Get him out of San Fran. That is exactly the type of player that they could take this offense to the next level. A true high-end number 2 receiver who could be a 1 if Mari has to step out for a game or 2. That's where my focus goes this offseason.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Again, you 5th-year option, so you get him at a reasonable price. It's going to be a lot to keep him happy because he's already come out and said that. The other thing, earlier in the show, Casey, we showed the Browns wide receiver draft choices since 2010. If you want a disappointing exercise, the one first-rounder is Corey Coleman. You had Greg Little in the 2nd round. Josh Gordon was a supplemental 2nd round. Then in the 3rd round, it's the guys they've taken lately, Tillman, Bell, and Schwartz. I mean, it's 2023, and it's a passing league, and that's why we've struggled as a franchise, or the Browns as a franchise have struggled.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, they got to keep swinging the axe. You still got to keep going for it and try, and eventually you're going to hit. And we don't even know that Bell and Tillman aren't hits.
Right.
They're very young in their career. But, yeah, since 2010, if you go back, it's a dark history right there. I don't know if people want to revisit that. But, yeah, there's several. There's going to be options in this draft. There's going to be guys when you pick it at 54, and there's going to be guys when you pick at 85. There's going to be options on the board. That's just this league. Like everyone covets those real high-end guys that go the first half of day one. But just look, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, Jefferson. There's second-round picks that are superstars in this league. It's about, flipping over those stones, know exactly what you're looking for, and hitting when you take that pick. So they got to keep swinging the axe till they get one of those guys.
Well, the draft, to your point, the draft where the Browns took Corey Coleman 15th overall, Tyreek Hill was taken in the 5th round.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like last year, Puka Nacua went in the 5th round.
Right.
These guys are out there. You just got to know what you're looking for and just keep swinging, baby. Eventually, you'll make connections.
Well, and so we're not completely crushing the draft process. Martin Emerson in the 3rd round, DeJuan Jones in the 4th round. The last 2 seasons have been success story. Go find some guys that can make plays like that.
Yeah. Well, they're really good at certain positions, right? Like they're really good at drafting secondary. They know what they're looking for. They just think it's all about getting your scouts in tune with wide receiver, because that is a position they've traditionally whiffed on. So you got to find those guys. That's how you do it. When you have these high-end contracts, you have to hit on some of these lower draft picks.
Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily Network 216 and I are going to step aside to take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, 3 bold predictions for the Browns off-season. That's straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in 1. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily Network 216. So this by Dogs by Nature. 3 bold predictions for the Browns offseason. We'll start out. Browns trade up in the 2024 draft. Casey, that would surprise me. Again, they do have a second-round pick. I would be surprised. It's not out of the realm. If there's somebody they really like, Andrew Berry has shown he'll do that, but I would be surprised in this particular draft.
Yeah, well, that's just it. It's all the board. It's all about the board and value. You saw them jump up to take JOK. You saw them fall back and pick up Martin Emerson. So it could go either way. It just depends on where they see that value at.
All right, the next one in this list of 3 bold predictions: the Browns trade Jedrick Wills, can save between $12 and $15 million in cap space by trading Wills in the offseason. He's probably about average price for a starting left tackle in the NFL. You got to tell me what they would get. I don't know that they would trade him just to trade him.
Yeah, they might just be trading him because they don't plan on signing him a long term, so there's to get something out of the deal. But it comes down to a simple math equation. You got 3 tackles. You're paying 2 of them top dollar, and you have a third, and traditionally he's not getting paid much, and that would be your swing tackle. Except your third's DeJuan Jones, and it would be organizational malpractice not to get that young man on the field. So they got to figure out a way to get him on the field. And with Conklin's contract, he's going to be tougher to move, especially coming off that injury. So they do have an equation they need to work out here because at the end of the day, DeJuan Jones needs to be on the field. Like, I don't see any other way around it. And you're going to either have to cut bait on Conklin or find a trade partner. You're more likely to find a trade partner with Jedrick. Look at Tennessee, maybe. You know, they did just get Bill Callahan, and they have tackle issues. So there could be a trade partner out there. I don't know how it happens, but no matter, at the end of the day, they got to find a way to get DeJuan onto that field.
All right, and the third of the bold predictions for the Browns in the offseason, they say the Browns add a big-name wide receiver. They mentioned Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown, Gabriel Davis, and Curtis Samuel. If you're giving me, they also mentioned Hopkins and Sutton later in that. Give me my choice of those. I'm going either Ridley or Davis. I am not a fan of Marquise Brown. I think he's fine, but I don't think it's what they need. I think that is kind of more of what they have.
Yeah. When I look at those names, Ridley's the only one I think even qualifies as a big name receiver. I think those other guys are more, role players, ancillary pieces, things like that. But I'm hoping this is true. I'm hoping that there is a trade made to bring Brandon Ayuk from San Francisco to Cleveland. And to me, that would qualify as that big name receiver.
All right, so you're sticking on the Ayuk train. All right, we'll follow.
I'm gonna break a table pounding it. I promise you that.
All right, we'll follow you with that one. All right, from February 20th, next week, to March 5th, teams can franchise tag players, keeping them from reaching unrestricted free agency. Albert Breer thinks that the Panthers will do so with their star pass rusher, Brian Burns. He also thinks that the Bengals will do that with T. Higgins. Those two could be tag and trade candidates heading into the offseason. You can be sure if they do tag and trade T. Higgins, he will not be coming to Cleveland.
Yeah, they're not going to do it inside the division. They're especially not going to give it inside the state. The Brian Burns one's interesting, though, because they can't get nothing for him. They were offered 2 first-round picks 2 years ago from the Rams for that young man and turned it down. So the last thing they can do is just let him walk. So at minimum, they're going to slap the tag on him. And if they can't work out anything, they'll probably try to do a tag and trade. And he'd be someone I'd be very interested in. I think there's a couple other candidates that should make that list. I think Michael Pittman will get tagged in Indy. I think Josh Allen also will be a candidate to be tagged. And if you can swing a tag and trade for either of those players, I would do so.
Yeah, Pittman is intriguing, and he fits kind of in that age range that they typically like to sign and give multi-year deals to. This one again from ESPN.com. Important players, coaches, executives entering the 2024 offseason. Browns have 2 of them on this list. Deshaun Watson, 3 years, $138 million in fully guaranteed salary remains on his contract, so Watson's not going anywhere, but he'll have to show he's worth it after the offense functioned better. 5 regular season games with Joe Flacco. Fair enough. Nick Chubb, 28, coming off major season-ending knee surgery, scheduled to earn $12 million non-guaranteed contract in the final year of his contract. He's an extension candidate, but he's also a potential cap casualty. I don't think there's any way he's a cap casualty. Andrew Berry, in as much, said so. They'll find a way to extend him, incentive-laden, minimize the financial risk, but if he comes back, reward him financially because they think a lot of him.
Yeah, you could tell that in his postseason presser. AB was basically letting you know he knows what he means to the team, what he means to the city, to the fan base. Nick Chubb is the heart of this team, and they're going to work out something. And I know the injury is a massive concern, as it should be. Getting that age, he has a decent amount of miles on him, a lot of carries in the league. But there's no doubt that he's giving 110% to get back to what he was. If anything, they're going to have to pull the reins on him to slow him down because he's going to be that guy who pushes it to get back on the field, and he needs to know there's not a hurry. We would rather have Nick Chubb at 100% the second half of the season than opening day. So, bring him along slowly. I definitely expect an extension to be announced probably that 3rd week of July. That's when they seem to do those things, and get him inked long-term, at least another 2 years on the books for Nick Chubb.
Do you think they sign somebody that can be the 1B, if you will, behind him to make sure, okay, Nick took some big hits in that. Let's give him 15 carries. And they monitored the carries to begin with. Do you think they kind of want to dial it back and make sure they're not rushing him back to 20, 25 carries?
100%. I think they do that. I heard you guys in the last segment before I popped on. Zach Moss is a name I'm very intrigued by. I think that'd be a player that fits that category very nicely. Someone you could bring in and he can be that 1A for the first few games while Chubb gets his legs back under him, and he's a battering ram, someone that you could unleash and give Chubb complete series off, and just kind of let them rotate and just be that true complementary back. Someone that can really carry the load if Chubb isn't back to where he was immediately. I do think that is the move, because running back at the end of the day, it's where you get the most bang for your buck. You can sign a guy for $3.5 million and get a legit starter for that money, just because of the way the position has been devalued.
Yeah, and think of the way he and Kareem Hunt were a couple of years ago, and if they can recreate that, I'm with you. All right, before I let you go, scratching my head at this one. So 3 cap casualty cuts to save millions this offseason by the Browns. This from the factory of sadness. So tight end, Jordan Akins, they can save $2 million. 2, wide receiver Elijah Moore, they can save $1.8 million. And 3, Ogo Okunrankwo, they can save $3.3 million. First of all, I don't think there's any way they cut Okunrankwo. But when you're talking $2 million, $1.8, and $3.3 million, I just get this visual picture of Andrew Berry looking for pennies in the couches out in Berea against the salary cap. They can restructure a contract and get 6 times the savings that they're doing by cutting those guys.
That's just it, Dave. This isn't what they do. They don't cut. They restructure. If they cut, it's going to be a big cut. It actually gives you relief. They're not going to do it. There's no way Obo gets cut. You know what I mean? It's not in the cards. Like he's a rotational piece. He's an important piece. 3.3, that's way undervalued in my opinion. You're going to see 4, 5, 6 big restructures before the season. That's how they do it. That's how they do it every year. When they draw these contracts up, they already know what years they're going to restructure.
Right.
This is a very long, detailed plan. We're looking at those numbers, and you might panic. Oh, we're already over right now. They know what it's going to be. They know what that number is going to be. They'll do it in tiers. You'll get the first tier. It'll get them to level, and then they'll do a few more to give them that wiggle room to have that money that they can carry over to next year. That's just how they do it, man. This is part of the plan.
And when Andrew Berry was asked if they could find the money they needed to do anything in free agency, he didn't hesitate. Yes, and he even said we've got these. We have this year, we have 3 years, we have 5 years. They have it that detailed and planned.
Yeah, they already have the money. They just haven't made it official yet to us. But they know where that's coming from. They know the players they're restructuring, and the players' agents know who's restructuring as well. You know, it's just they just got to wait for the right time, and they'll do that once again. You get into July, and all of a sudden.
Quincy Kinnamon, make sure you check him out. Dog Pound Daily and Network 216, always really good Brown stuff. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. See you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.